If the NFL is unwilling or unable to hold Mr. Snyder accountable, then I am prepared to do so.
A U.S. House of Representatives panel on Wednesday said it will issue a subpoena to Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder after he refused to testify at a hearing into his NFL team's workplace culture. The league's commissioner, Roger Goodell, who attended the hearing virtually, was asked by U.S. Representative Carolyn Maloney how the league would hold Snyder accountable for not showing up.
Madam Chairwoman, I do not have any responsibility for whether he appears before Congress.
Mr. Snyder has not been held accountable. His refusal to testify sends a clear message that he is more concerned about protecting himself than coming clean with the American people. That is why I am announcing now my intent to issue a subpoena for the testimony of Mr. Snyder for a deposition next week.
The Committee on Oversight and Reform asked both Snyder and Goodell to appear as part of its investigation into allegations regarding a hostile workplace culture at the Commanders. A year ago, the NFL fined the team $10 million after an independent counsel review found the workplace demonstrated a general lack of respect toward women. In announcing the fine, the NFL said, quote, "Bullying and intimidation frequently took place, and many described the culture as one of fear, and numerous female employees reported having experienced sexual harassment." Last week, Snyder's attorney outlined several reasons why he would not attend Wednesday's hearing, including that Snyder would be out of the country on long-standing team business.
When I heard about the leaked decision on Roe versus Wade and had a chance to read it, my first thought was, what a terrible day for women's right to control their own body, for bodily autonomy, for privacy. I mean, this potential ruling is such an overreach into what should be a private conversation between a pregnant person and their loved one or with their physician. And then as I read it further, I started to fear for LGBTQ plus equality and really much of the civil rights progress we have made in this nation because of the rationale used to justify this leaked decision. You know, to say that our Constitution can only be interpreted as of the time it was written, in my opinion, that's a dangerous way to look at our country's guiding document. The Constitution was ratified in 1789, and it begins with "we the people." Well, we the people in 1789 did not include Blacks, did not include Indigenous people, and did not include women. And the other thing that really concerns me is the rationale that fundamental rights or unenumerated rights, those rights that are not specifically outlined word for word in the Constitution, that they have to have a long history or tradition in our nation. Marriage equality for the LGBTQ plus community is only coming up on 7 years. That is not a long history or tradition. But I also like to say interracial marriage. The fundamental right to marry was mentioned in 1967 in the Supreme Court's decision in Loving versus Virginia. Our nation has a much longer history of denying the right to marry to two people of differing races than it does in affirming that right to marry. So to say that these rights have to have a long history or tradition, it's another thing that concerns me and worries me greatly. And just this overreach with privacy for the queer community, Lawrence versus Texas, which struck down anti-sodomy laws. With that rationale, could we lose Lawrence versus Texas? Could same-sex intimacy once again be criminalized? How do I feel about the status of marriage equality, the safety of marriage equality, given this leaked decision? And I have to say, I'm pretty terrified because this leaked decision, the rationale used in it is really a roadmap to attack a lot of the rights, a lot of the progress we have made in our nation. So I am concerned. And I think this is something where an extreme court is doing things that the American people don't want.
Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman arrived in Turkey for the first time in years on Wednesday for talks with President Tayyip Erdogan, marking a turnaround in their relations. The visit was aimed at fully normalising ties between Ankara and Riyadh that were ruptured after a Saudi hit squad killed and dismembered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018 at the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul. Erdogan at the time blamed the killing on the highest levels of the Saudi government. Prince Mohammed denies any involvement in the murder. In April, the pair held one-on-one talks in Saudi Arabia after a months-long drive to mend relations. Ankara stopped all criticism and halted its murder trial in April, transferring the case to Riyadh in a move condemned by human rights groups. The Crown Prince has been making effort to rehabilitate his image beyond the Gulf, leveraging Saudi Arabia's vast wealth and oil production capacity to lure in Western leaders and private business partners. The visit also comes as Turkey's economy is badly strained by a slumping lira and inflation soaring beyond 70%. Analysts say Saudi funds and foreign currency could help Erdogan shore up support ahead of elections by June 2023. Erdogan welcomed Prince Mohammed at the presidential palace in Ankara with a ceremony, and the two shook hands and embraced before being met by members of the Turkish cabinet. There were, however, no public statements scheduled for after their talks. Erdogan said last week he and Riyadh's de facto leader would discuss to what much higher level they can take ties during talks in Ankara.
Say showgirls!
Las Vegas is a city where many things are not real, from its fake Elvis Presleys to its phony Eiffel Tower. And now, its grass won't be any different. Decades-long drought made worse by climate change has forced the city to rip up millions of square feet of grass, including greenery along its iconic Vegas Strip, and replace much of it with artificial turf.
We've done installs at the Bellagio, at the Golden Nugget, at the Caesars Palace, here on the Las Vegas Boulevard Strip. We've also done like by the Las Vegas welcome sign.
Installer Carlos Rodriguez explains that instead of planting the green stuff, he hammers it in.
So basically, we're driving 6-inch nails on the perimeter of the turf, so that way it holds it down.
It's all in the name of saving water, as Nevada is among the states that gets its water from nearby Lake Mead, whose levels have dropped to an all-time low. That in turn has made growing some grasses in Nevada actually illegal. Bronson Mack is with the Southern Nevada Water Authority.
Last year, the Nevada legislature passed a law that now prohibits the irrigation of non-functional grass that provides no recreational value and is only decorative. They passed a law that requires that grass be completely removed by the end of 2026.
Mack told Reuters the new law will apply to businesses and apartment complexes with grass that is considered non-functional. At the moment, the law is not applicable to existing private homes, but new houses are not allowed to feature real grass. Desert-friendly plants that use little water are also a suitable substitute.
The reality is that grass uses the equivalent of 73 gallons of water a year per square foot. That's enough water to put where we are completely underwater by 10 feet.
Some private homeowners are replacing their lawns voluntarily, like Linda Laird, who's lived in Las Vegas since 1985 and says she's watched with horror as water levels in Lake Mead have plunged.
I feel like if I can do my small little part to helping conserve some of our water here in Las Vegas, that I'm doing a small part to help everyone else.
Those in the artificial grass business are also quick to point out that what's used today is often a world apart from the astroturf and green outdoor carpet of years gone by, for while it may be fake, much of it is made with plant-based materials.
U.S. stocks ended slightly lower in choppy trading on Wednesday after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told a Senate committee that the central bank was not trying to engineer a recession to fight inflation, but acknowledged that raising interest rates could spark one.
It's certainly a possibility.
Tom Hainlin is global investment strategist at U.S. Bank.
The needle the Fed's trying to thread, which is how do you bring down inflation without bringing demand so far down that you end up with a corporate profit contraction or an economic recession. And so that's the needle they're trying to thread. And their policy is a pretty blunt instrument. It's just broad interest rate policy, and that's it's a blunt instrument to try to slow down consumer demand and business demand, just enough to get supply and demand back in balance without bringing demand too far down.
All three major indexes finished in the red, but each one only down fractionally. Energy stocks, which have been the strongest performers this year, fell along with oil prices, which dropped 3% on Wednesday. Shares of Dow slid after Credit Suisse downgraded the chemical maker's stock to underperform, saying the company was, quote, over-earning amid issues with supply chains and will likely take a hit as they normalize. And finally, shares of Revlon, which filed for bankruptcy last week, soared 32% in heavy trading, riding a wave of recent retail investor interest to become the latest so-called meme stock.